Well, you're probably reading my X feed because I said this morning, is it a coincidence that these tariffs benefit directly the Tesla business?
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. On this week's show, Jeff and I chat about what Canadians need to know about new automotive tariffs and why Tesla might be the only winner. We also dive into everything you need to know about Signalgate and what went wrong when government officials decided that it was a good place for planning an attack. We also share some incredible news about a stir stick that can detect date rape drugs, unpack AI election ads on social media, and discuss the latest development in transparent solar cells. All right, Jeff, we've been doing the show for 6 weeks, and it feels like we could do a new show every single day. How are you keeping up to date with all these stories?
Yeah, I think we definitely got a pretty dense news cycle right from the beginning here with the all the Trump stuff and all that. And it's not always easy keeping up with all the latest news, but we're trying to stay on top of that for our listeners. And so let's get straight to the headlines.
News matters.
The Canadian tech group Build Canada's public platform for policy ideas has launched a Canada Spends website to track government spending ahead of the upcoming Canadian federal election. Now, Jeff, some people are comparing this to Elon Musk's Doge efforts in the US, and I think this is a bit unfair and also a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think Canada Spends gets all its data from the Government of Canada Resources published data there. So the group has claimed their goal with this website is really to make that data more accessible, easier to understand. And, if you take a look at the Canadian government's version of this called Infobase, it seems like that's a worthy goal because Infobase can be a little bit hard to sort of tell what you're looking at and be able to find things. So I think it's totally admirable that they're doing this. And, in the past 10 years, Canada's federal civil service has grown by 40%, seemingly with diminishing returns in terms of the services we get. So spending is a very important thing for us to be able to examine and understand as voters. So I totally thumbs up for me on this thing.
Well, let's just say there's a bit of good news for the Canada Spends group that is doing this, because the reality is that the bar has been lowered, because now what we're comparing this to when we talk about Doge is a tech tyrant on a stage with a chainsaw trying to cut everything. So there's a lot of wiggle room there, I think, Jeff.
Yeah, the Doge team, my gosh, some questionable backgrounds. The biggest one that probably came out is a technologist that goes by the handle Big Balls, very charming. And he has a grandfather who is literally a KGB spy. Just within the past couple of years, he's been providing technology services to cyber criminals who online have bragged about trafficking in stolen data, cryptocurrency theft, and even doxing an FBI agent. So to say that this person is a completely inappropriate hire, to have them have access to your personal government data and things like this, it's just totally unreasonable, and another sign that these guys are not serious about doing what they claim they want to do in a way that is responsible and good for citizens.
Well, we didn't rehearse this, but I think you just gave me another example about how the bar has been lowered. Like, if your name isn't Big Balls and you don't have a KGB relative, then maybe you're all in the clear.
Absolutely.
Now we do want to look at some good tech news, and this is incredibly innovative. I'm not sure it's going to make the headlines the way that maybe Doge does, for example, but it's a really interesting and incredible story that's potentially going to save and maybe save lives, but also just it's something that I think is so revolutionary in so many ways.
Yeah, it's really an encouraging story. It's a team of researchers at the University of British Columbia have developed a stir stick that should cost only about $1, and it will change color within 30 seconds of detecting a date rape drug in your drink, like ketamine or GHB. So this is really important. People have their lives impacted so horribly with stuff like this. So there already have, there's already existing kind of kits where you can do this testing, but to have it in a stir stick that you can just drop in a drink and very quickly see in a very obvious way if there's something bad in it, I think that is pretty revolutionary. And so I hope they are able to get that to market quickly.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And like you said, I mean, just revolutionary, so simple in so many ways. And it was interesting when you sent over this story, I was doing some research. I also found that this week in Vancouver that Canada officials at the border, they actually seized about 400 liters of a chemical that is typically used to actually create the date rape drug or also ecstasy. That's kind of the
Yeah.
two outputs of this chemical. And essentially, it depends on the dosage. So I was trying to understand, just based on that information of 400 liters, like how many doses is that of this chemical? And they said it's between 100,000 and 400,000
Wow.
doses. So an enormous amount of potential harm. And just so people understand with this chemical, you know, it is either known as liquid ecstasy if it's taken in smaller doses, but it's also the date rape drug when it's taken in higher doses because it leads to sedation. So really happy that these Canadian officials got that off of the streets. So really good news.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there are other types of date rape drugs. So this, I don't know if this covers them all, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's called the spikeless stir stick, and it's just practical, easy to use in real world situations. So congratulations to those guys. And another positive story here is a breakthrough with transparent solar cells.
Yes, this is another amazing story. The City Solar Project has been able to overcome the main issue with transparent solar cells, which is efficiency. City Solar has been able to reach an efficiency of 12.3%. This brings them very close to the efficiency of normal commercial solar cells. So the vision here would be to be able to outfit office buildings, for example, with transparent solar cells for windows and harnessing that renewable energy, and there would be no additional space required. So another example of an innovative technology that, again, may not make your headlines, but again, this is kind of life-changing for people.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we can all sort of picture big fields of solar panels out in the prairies or whatever like that. This allows you to take that right into city settings, and so you don't have to build all the infrastructure to sort of get that power to the source and all of that. So it's really absolutely a great move. It's such a neat way to think that you could have this invisible infrastructure built right into office buildings and not have to make many other considerations than that, to just be able to harness that energy right there in the building. So super cool. Hopefully can move the needle on some of our environmental woes a bit. And yeah, so glad to see stuff like that.
Well, that is an interesting story for sure. In our final news story, one of the things we wanted to talk about, because we have been covering social media a lot on the show so far, and there's always something new, especially in the Meta universe or on X, but this is a little bit different because there's actually a new social platform out there, and I know, Jeff, you just joined it. It's called Sez.us. That's SEZ. And basically it lets users score other people's posts in an effort to punish trolls and rage baiters so that people are able to have a more civil discourse. I mean, can this actually ever work?
I hope so. I certainly like the idea a lot. It seems to make sense. We've obviously had Meta and Twitter and other platforms paying lip service to trying to make more sort of civil discourse, I guess, to use the term from this. But yeah, this idea seems to be different and seems to be very focused. It was launched by a veteran political strategist, Joe Trippi, who says he wants to change online behavior by punishing people who insist on excessively provocative posts, which helps them on other platforms achieve reach. So on this platform, it would do quite the opposite, which is awesome. So as you said, I signed up to try it out. And while there's a little bit of friction where you're used to just clicking thumbs up or like or whatever, this, when you click that, it will pop up a screen that allows you to rank the approval, influence, insightfulness, relevance, and politeness of a given post from -5 to +5, I think it is. So you don't have to rank them all, and I expect maybe these will change over time or perhaps get flattened down a little bit. But it's a really interesting approach, and although there doesn't seem to be that many people on there so far, I've had some interactions, and, you know, like most of these social media networks, the big challenge isn't coming up with a feature set. The big challenge is populating your user base. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, definitely nice to see people trying out different things. If we had more faith in Meta or Twitter, maybe they'd steal an idea like this, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, and I think people are looking for somewhere new to go. You know, if you think about the Guy Kawasaki interview that we did just a couple of episodes, that's one of the things that he said. You know, he said, like, you know, as soon as a billionaire takes over a site, it tends to get absolutely ruined. And he's trying to navigate this space and ended up obviously using LinkedIn more and Blue Sky a little bit more, but there's no sort of perfect place for people to go. And so I think there is room there in terms of creating something new. Now, Jeff, I have to say that probably the biggest news story, which you're going to dive into in more detail, is just flabbergasting in terms of what went on. So everybody has heard about the U.S. Defense group chat breach. I will just say one thing about group chats. I despise them. So please don't add me to your group chat because it's career ruining potentially. And even more so if you're in the U.S. government and you're using it to actually plan attacks. So Jeff is going to talk about this further, and that's coming up next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
As most of you probably know, and as Amber covered in her newsletter this week, U.S. national security leaders, including the Secretary of Defense, who initially denied this chat happened, the Secretary of State, and the Vice President, recently accidentally added one of America's top journalists to their Signal group chat, where they shared detailed military plans about Yemen. This included, and I quote, "precise information about weapon packages, targets, and timing." So to be absolutely clear, this definitely could have put the lives of U.S. servicemen in risk. Luckily, the mistakenly included individual, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, is a principled and reasonable man who understood what his obligations must be given these crazy circumstances. But frankly, that's just pure luck. Astoundingly, the U.S. National Security Agency had just sent out a special security bulletin in February warning of the vulnerabilities of using an encrypted messaging service like Signal and trying to discourage its use. Now, Signal is one of the most secure encrypted chat apps out there, with no reports of it ever having been compromised by hackers. But there are obviously a few things I think we can all learn from this crazy situation. One, it doesn't matter how thorough Signal or any other provider's encryption is if you've invited somebody to share in your conversation from the inside. So make sure you trust that person, or no amount of encryption is going to help you. Two, and further to that, and given references in the Project 2025 blueprint and elsewhere in American conservative circles about using Signal to avoid scrutiny, Russian professional hacking groups have been using phishing scams to try to gain access to those conversations, again, avoiding the end-to-end encryption in the app. So you can't even necessarily be sure that everyone in the chat is really who they appear to be. And in larger group chats, you may not even notice that they're there. Third, don't forget that while some apps may notify you when somebody takes a screenshot of your chat, there's no real defense against or ability to be aware of somebody taking a photograph of your phone screen with a second phone to capture the information in a chat. So if you've got something you want to keep private, then make sure not to advertise the existence of the chat, including where and when it'll take place. Make sure your group chats don't have so many people that you can't keep track of them all. Review all of the participants and confirm their identities. Also avoid using the linked devices feature in Signal, which Russia has been actively trying to leverage for access. And then all you can do is just hope you can trust everyone else involved. I'm The Other Mac. Stay safe out there.
Coming up next, we talk to Flavio Volpe about what new automotive tariffs mean for workers and why Elon Musk stands to benefit.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Amber and I spend a lot of time on social media, so we want to introduce you to people we follow who are the best at what they do. This week, Amber is sitting down with Flavio Volpe to discuss why President Trump's auto tariffs defy logic.
Talking Tech.
I'm so looking forward to speaking with Flavio Volpe, who is the president of Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Amber.
Well, we want to talk about the news that U.S. President Donald Trump is moving ahead with a 25% tariff on imported vehicles on April 2nd. That is the situation right now. Can you break that down for us? What does this mean?
Well, I give you a really complicated technical breakdown, but I think I should just start by saying it's nuts. It's a tariff on every single vehicle import into the U.S. at 25%, which is probably about 4 to 5 times the profit margin of every single one of those vehicles. We'll put those vehicles in 2 buckets. One is the rest of the world outside of North America. There's no American content on those. On the North American vehicles, and I'll speak for Canada, but I think the numbers are very similar for Mexico. About half the cars that get made here, we have a capacity for about 2 million a year, are American brands. 50% of the content in the 2 million cars come from American factories. 55% of the raw material, steel from Pennsylvania, resins from Texas, are American. And so the president has taken aim at American interests in Canada and Mexico, while he is talking about using a tariff wall to repatriate jobs that have been here for 120 years. All he's doing, and the market is telling him that in math, that he's hurting General Motors, Ford, and the American brands of Stellantis and American part suppliers and American raw material suppliers just as badly as he's threatening Canadian entities.
So you mentioned jobs. I think we often hear people talk about the automotive industry, both here in Canada and in the US, in terms of how it will be impacted. But really, what we're talking about is auto workers and potentially hundreds of thousands. Can you put that into perspective in terms of how many people this will or could affect and how quickly that could happen?
Yeah, I'll give you 3 numbers for Canada, and I'll give you one main number for the US. In Canada, there's 125,000 people that make something, either the cars or the parts, or the tools for the parts in the cars. Then there's about 375,000 that we call them indirect jobs, but they are directly related to the manufacturing sector. They facilitate that manufacturing or the delivery of that product or financial services on that product. That if that product and that industry didn't exist, those jobs would have to, you'd have to find other customer industries or you're gone too. And then there's probably another 250 to 300,000 jobs for a grand total of about 750,000 that are in automotive sales and service, the dealers, the independent businesses that are across this country that rely on that product coming in, all of whom would be severely impacted by this. The other side of the border, the most important number is 950,000 Americans make parts or cars or the tools for those parts and cars. Similar spin-off, you're talking millions of people in the auto sector, but those ones, just like the 125,000 here, are very likely to be sitting at home within a week or two of the imposition of those tariffs, because none of the companies involved can absorb that 25%, and none of their end customers would buy vehicles to absorb those costs.
It's really unbelievable. And I heard you do an interview on CBC where you said it's like a monkey with a machine gun.
Yeah.
Why would he and they want to do this?
Well, I think yesterday he was concerned with the saving the job of the Secretary of Defense, and he caught his own government uh, by surprise. Around midday yesterday, earlier in the week, the talk of sectoral tariffs had been pushed off past April 2nd. Widely reported, Reuters, Wall Street Journal. Middle of the day yesterday, as we're the coverage of war plans being texted out on Signal started to cause a real problem. He said, we're going to make a tariff announcement at 4 o'clock on automotive. They're coming now. He didn't get to that until 5:30, in part, as I'm told, they were all scrambling saying, we're not ready. On what basis of law are we doing this? Who's covering it? Is it cars? Is it parts? Who's it on? And he just went out ahead of them. Evidence of that is he did his pronouncement and he couldn't answer the questions on, does that include parts? And how do you deal with American content? And over the course of the evening and into the overnight, various clarifications. So when you wake up this morning, cars on April 3rd, not even April 2nd, I don't know what you need the extra day for. Maybe you wanted to save April 2nd for his Liberation Day. April 3rd on cars, May 3rd on parts. And by the way, if that vehicle made in Canada has American content in it, the American content would be excluded from the tariff imposition. And you should be happy, because that means your tariff is not 4 times the profit margin. It's only going to be about 2 times the profit margin.
When you put this into perspective, especially with all the numbers, I mean, it is staggering. But one thing I also wanted to learn from you is just how deeply embedded this tariff free relationship in automotive has been over the decades, because it isn't like he's undoing something that President Biden did just a few years ago. It's something that has been a relationship that has worked for many, many decades.
Yeah, look, a lot of this discussion is about free trade, and the first free trade agreement between any 2 major developed countries was the U.S.-Canada Auto Pact of 1965, which just focused on this sector and said, in gross terms, if you can guarantee the production of 1 unit for every vehicle purchased in Canada, we'll invest. The D3 at the time was the D4, included AMC, will invest in Canada for that production, and then the goods can go back and forth. We have had free trade in automotive for 60 years. When we present various charts that say, oh, well, these parts can cross a border up to 7 or 8 times before they get delivered to a customer as a vehicle, and the sourcing for major components could come from Mexico, Canada, and US for the same, rear suspension assembly. The president says, well, that's inefficient. Howard Lutnick, who is another stable genius, says that's inefficient. I said, only if you look at a map. In automotive, we look at the satellite image and we grind it down. What's the difference between Windsor and Detroit? The border that we canceled for economic terms in 1965. And the biggest winners in this free trade arrangement has been General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Jeep. And they've been begging for him to back off, and he's ignoring them. Who's he doing it for?
Well, that really brings me to my next question, because one of the things that we do on this show, where we talk a lot about technology, is that we talk about what's happening with Elon Musk, with
Yeah.
Tesla. And when I look into Tesla vehicles, they top the list in terms of vehicles with high domestic content. So arguably, this could potentially benefit Elon Musk. And we've seen this story repeat itself over and over again over the past few weeks, where Elon tends to benefit from a lot of these decisions. What would you say to that?
Well, you're probably reading my X feed, because I said this morning, is it a coincidence that these tariffs benefit directly the Tesla business? This is a company that, for lots of smart reasons, in trying to drive the cost down for electric vehicles, has tried to insource a whole bunch of their component manufacturing, and then doing things like big gigacastings. So reducing the number of parts that they rely on and doing them themselves. The biggest production plant in the US by units of volume is a Tesla plant in Fremont, California. Makes about 650,000 cars a year. A little aside, what used to be the biggest one that did 750,000 cars a year is in that direction in Oshawa, Ontario. Elon Musk and Tesla they make cars in Fremont, California. They make that silly Cybertruck in Texas, and they're competing with the Chinese. They're competing with BYD, who has caught up to them in terms of units of sales in EVs. But BYD also makes internal combustion engine vehicles and hybrids, etc. How is Tesla going to compete with BYD when it buys its batteries from CATL? When its other major production node is Shanghai? Well, let me walk you through real quick how that might work. If you break the Ford business and the GM business and the American divisions of Stellantis, and all of those businesses sell 900,000 pickup trucks. The Ford F-Series, the number one selling, 950,000 pickup trucks. All their SUV business, Mustang, same thing with General Motors, Jeep, and Ram. Elon Musk bought Twitter, leveraging the Tesla balance sheet for $44 billion and didn't sweat. The current market cap of Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis is in the same area. In 1979, Chrysler was going out of business, and Lee Iacocca got Jimmy Carter to help him. In 2009, Chrysler was going out of business, got Barack Obama to help him. He's got two presidents. If the president can break the business of one of the D3, he might do what Barack Obama did, which is bring Sergio Marchionne and Fiat in to partner with Chrysler. To me, if you wanted to set up Elon Musk's Tesla's growth through mergers and acquisitions and come forward as the American savior, this is the way you do it.
Absolutely. I'm just waiting for Mark Zuckerberg to announce that Meta is building a car at this rate.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we're coming to that point, unfortunately. So, the question I think many Canadians have on their minds is not just can Canada survive this in the automotive sector, but how can we survive this if, in fact, these tariffs are enforced?
Well, let me add one more question at the beginning of that for context. Should Canada survive this? Because I got a lot of people say to me, well, why do we need to be in the automotive sector? And then the other questions. I always answer that with the automotive sector is the big leagues around the world. Every major jurisdiction around the world says, what's the biggest aggregate product for advanced applications of technology, AI, machine learning, advanced metallurgies, building clusters where you have tens of thousands of jobs that feed families and pay mortgages. So yeah, we should try. And can we? Well, I think what was interesting is Mark Carney on the election trail yesterday, in his role as party leader, said, okay, look, scenario A, we should fix it. We should make sure that we keep access to the US market at all costs. Scenario B, if it breaks, and he puts up a tariff wall that's 25, 50, 75% with all these layers. We make 2 million cars a year and we buy 2 million cars a year. We have the supply and demand to have a relevant industry. Before Donald Trump showed up, I would say that would be incredibly inefficient. That would drive the prices up. Well, he's about to drive them up to almost double in some cases. Can we convince those companies that are here that they could and should build where they sell, and then support the auto sector, the suppliers, and the tool makers and the raw material suppliers say, look, how do we help you through that transition? Could we do that? I think the answer is possibly. I think we have to try, because once we lose those clusters, like Australia did, then you lose your ability to aggregate at scale all kinds of new technologies that drive other clusters in the economy. I think the KW and Ottawa's technology clusters are our competitive advantage in automotive in Canada. We have a connected autonomous future potential, but Donald Trump is trying to mercantilize us to say, we don't need that. We want the stuff that's in the ground. Well, we'll keep it.
Now, I have been following you for a long time on social media, and I know you've been raising alarms about this very issue since late in 2024. And I know you're doing dozens and dozens of interviews every single week. So I wanted to ask you for my last question, is there anything that you haven't been asked or you're not regularly asked that you would like to share before we let you go?
Well, I think that sometimes we deal with the acute crisis, and then we don't get to talk about the promise of the auto sector and why this is actually a crisis. What do you want to keep here? And we haven't been talking about the Chinese since we started talking about Washington. The Chinese have built an incredible sector. Now, of course, it's subsidized and to the point where they're just trying to buy market share around the world. But they understand that electric vehicles are connected autonomous vehicles that are part of smart cities that help to generate terabytes of data in the lifetime of each one of the vehicles. That is incredibly valuable for human beings. They use it for different reasons, but geospatial, behavioral, climatic, in AI and machine learning has allowed for all that data to be able to be crunched and used in real time. We have an incredible cluster of applied technology, both in software and hardware in this country, that is about to become part of this auto sector. And then we work together. The auto sector is a scale application for everybody. And then we got all kinds of critical minerals in the ground here whose business case is helped if all those cars electrify. And so it isn't just the bashing of metal and the melting of plastic. It's all of the really advanced core competencies and advantages that we have in this country, able to cluster around the second biggest expense that human beings have on the planet after shelter. And we are a burgeoning superpower in that space. We are in the big leagues. We've snuck our way in without a Canadian automaker, and all of that is being threatened by someone in the White House who doesn't understand it, doesn't care about it. And if he had his own way, we would beg to join them and hand everything over to them.
Well said, and never going to happen. So thank you for all
Never
your
gonna happen.
efforts with everything that you're doing. I know you're off to another interview, and as always, so appreciate your time. And I do want to say that, hey, things are evolving and changing, so maybe you'll come back on the show in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we have some better news. Thanks so much.
I'd come anytime. And let me say my last thought is thank you, because you're a champion of technology in Canada and helping to make those conversations real everywhere that I go. And so it's a pleasure to be on here and pleasure to work together with you. Canada forever.
Thanks, Flavio and Amber. Up next, we explore what the internet thinks of Canadian election ads thanks to AI.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
On a recent episode of the show, we spoke about election ads on Facebook and Instagram. Now we're going to dive into a conversation about which ads are working and how AI and social media can tell.
AI Spotlight.
I'm so excited to speak with Aaron Kelly, who is the co-founder and CEO of AskPolly.ai. Aaron, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Amber.
We spoke many years ago before everybody was talking about artificial intelligence, so I am familiar with Polly. For people who aren't, what exactly is it?
Sure. Polly is an artificial intelligence and she's for market research. So whenever the difference between market research and analytics, for example, is that researchers have to properly sample their data. You can't just take fire hose data, what we call fire hose data, raw posts from social media and believe that those are representative of the population as a whole, because the data could be very skewed. You could be listening to just young people or old people or what have you. So what Polly does is she makes sure that the people she's listening to are a subset of the census data. So she looks at the Canadian census and she says, this is the distribution of age and ethnicity and income and geography across the country. So this group is representative of the country as a whole. And we have millions of people in that sample, and we're taking it from social media, so it's all immediate. And it's people talking in their natural context. So sometimes when we ask people questions, we're putting our thumb on the scale, right? If I say, Amber, do you care about the environment? You want to be a good citizen? You'll say yes. But when you're on social media and you can talk about anything you want, how often do you choose to talk about environmental issues? So that's the idea, is we're looking at people's natural interest in topics, what they say, and we're analyzing it in near real time to give you a very accurate view of how Canadians feel on any topic.
When you say social media, that is a pretty broad group of sites. So are there any specific sites that you focus on without giving away any of your secret sauce?
Yes. So we look at all the big ones. So Facebook Threads, Blue Sky, X, Reddit, TikTok. So we're across 6 social media sites. And the reason we choose those ones is we want to make sure we're on sites that are very broad. Now, we're on other sites for other projects. So we do Truth Social and we do some of those other ones. But for things like the election, we don't want to be on election sites or very political sites. We want to be on sites where people can talk about anything so that we can evaluate to what extent do they choose to speak about these issues, because that gives us a good idea of who will show up to vote as well.
I think it's fair to say, especially as we are in the early days of an election here in Canada, that many people are looking to understand polls and what the polls are saying. One thing that I've always found really interesting about Polly is that you're not taking just a sample size, like you said, of 1,000 people who are answering a question. It is such a wide range of data. So when you compare it to the average poll where maybe 1,000 people are surveyed, what kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about like 2 million people, 2 million people. And here's what's really important. We're looking at the same people over time. So we can go back 10 years on the same people and see how their political views have changed or stayed the same over time, and how they reacted to different scandals in the past, and different stressors, to understand, did that affect their vote, and if so, how. So it's really important when you're doing regular phone polling, you're calling different people over time. We're looking at the same people over time and seeing how things evolve. So it's a much it's impossible to do that with phone polling, as you know, but for social media, it enables us to do that, and it gives you a much more robust result.
How successful has Polly been insofar as predicting election results?
She's been incredibly successful. His Polly, she not only can tell you the popular vote, she gets right down into seat counts. We've had studies done on us. Our stuff is all peer reviewed. And we've had documentaries made on Polly where we had to announce what the result would be before the election, and then they compare us to all the other pollsters. Polly came out #1. We did that on the second Trudeau government election. TVO did a documentary on us with exactly that. She has been right in almost every election. In some cases, she'll get some small things wrong, like certain voter segments. For example, in the Biden election, she missed the Latin American vote in Miami, but she got the overall Biden win correct. So she's incredibly, and she learns with every election. She gets stronger and stronger.
On a recent episode of this show, we talked about election advertisements online, and we thought it would be a great idea just to dive into some of the recent results from Polly. I saw a post on LinkedIn talking about which ad is more persuasive, and it compared the Sneaky Carney ad to the Mike Myers ad. People in Canada will know exactly what this is. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, so those two ads. So in the Sneaky Carney ad, it was a negative advertising is what we call it. It was scary music. It was all red. It was talking about how he had the shadow carbon tax, and basically what he says is not what he means. So it was basically your basic attack ad. The Mike Myers ad is Carney and Mike Myers from, well, Austin Powers and Saturday Night Live, who is a Canadian who grew up in Canada, now lives in the US, but talking about what makes them Canadian, and speaking about the threats of becoming the 51st state, with Mike Myers wearing a Never 51 hockey shirt, and just really talking about their pride in being Canadian and what it means to be Canadian. So it was a much more unifying ad, and there was no attacking, except for Donald Trump.
It's really amazing to see the sample size in the hundreds of thousands, but also I think it really signals what Canadians are looking for. Perhaps the negative messaging in the face of Donald Trump isn't really working. We do want this unifying voice and this unifying messaging that we see within that Mike Myers ad with Mark Carney. So when you look at something like this, do you think that things have shifted a little bit in Canada, especially as of late?
They have shifted, and here's the concerning thing for the Conservatives: they're not shifting with it, right? The mood has shifted, and they are really failing to pick up the change in that mood. I mean, they say they understand it, but when you look at the messaging, it's still attacking, it's still divisive, and people don't have the appetite for that. Now, that's not to say that they've abandoned the Conservatives. It's still a very tight race, because people came into it having made up their mind that they would vote Conservative, because there was a lot of frustration with the Trudeau government. But now that things have changed, people are concerned with the inability of the Conservatives to change with it, and they're asking, well, I mean, doesn't the Prime Minister have to be, able to read the room? Does he not have to be able to pivot? And so the Liberals are reading the room a lot better in this campaign, at least in the beginning of it, than the Conservatives are.
So when we look at the different social platforms and we think about the reality that we're in today in terms of some of the platforms being a little bit more left-leaning, some maybe a little more right-leaning, some maybe a little bit in the center, although I have not found those as of yet. But how does that influence the results that we're seeing? Because you mentioned, there are a wide number of social media platforms that are considered, but does the leanings of those platforms, does that influence the results a lot?
It doesn't. Now, it would if you were taking the fire hose data from Blue Sky, which is more left-leaning, and from X, which we're also on, which is more right-leaning, it would affect it. And we're not going across social platforms for that reason. We go across social platforms really because people talk about different issues on different platforms. So it's not really for the political strike. But if you were just downloading keyword searches, it would affect it a lot. And that's where we have a huge edge over our competitors, because the others can't sample that data. We have a political leanings model, if you will, where we've divided people actually into 20 different political categories. So it's not just left, center, right, it's all the gradations in between, 5% gradations. So we are making sure when we come on that we have that representation, as well as looking at income and age and all of that. We're also looking at, we've done a big study on how Canadians' leanings break down, and we're making sure that we're pulling from those different sites. If we're missing, let's say, very right-wing people, that we go and we find right-wing people, and we can identify them. They're reading certain media outlets, they're following certain people. So we've got all those criteria. We're making sure we get that balance and that we're matching it to how they are represented in the society at large.
Beyond people like me just being interested in the data, how else is it used?
Oh, interesting. So thank you for asking. And because in fact, politics is a very small part of what we do. We don't work for any political parties because we do a lot of work for the Canadian government and other governments around the world, public service. We do tracking of foodborne illness in Canada, tracking avian flu, the spread of when we had the salmonella outbreak in Canada in 2023. Polly identified salmonella, identified cantaloupes as the source. We do a lot of work in pharma. We do work for various causes. DEI causes. How do we get more kids playing hockey, kids from different ethnic backgrounds? So we've done lots and lots of studies for associations. For brands, we have car brands and food brands and things like that. So a wide swath of market research.
When you look out into the future, and I think it's kind of hard to do that right now, knowing there's so much going on, especially on the political front, but if you see the future of Polly a few years down the road, what is the concern in terms of maybe people being less inclined to share on social media and moving towards some private channels?
Well, we've had a lot of stressors on social media to date, right? We had the Cambridge Analytica scandal. We've had anger with Facebook in the face of that. And what happens is people find an X, let's not forget that, and people move to different channels when that happens. We have found that there seems to be a need for people to meet on social media. It's a great way to stay in touch with your friends, stay in touch with family, and to express your opinions on things. That is part of a democracy, is being able, not having to wait for the survey or to be, part of some, not everybody can show up to a protest on Thursday night, right? Social media is very accessible. And what we have found is people move from platform to platform, but they don't stop sharing on social.
It is fascinating, and it's been amazing to follow along with Polly all these years and see the impact that Polly is making. Thank you so much for joining me today. For people who want more information and want to follow along with Polly, where's the best place for them to go?
AskPolly.ai. That's where you can reach out and contact us, and we can give you a demo or do whatever you like.
Excellent. Erin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Aaron and Amber. Up next, speaking of online research, Amber speaks to one of the founders of Cashew Research about a big win for the company as they use AI to help businesses do market research in half the time.
Makers.
I'm so looking forward to speaking with Addie Graves, who is the co-founder and CEO of Cashew Research. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Amber. I'm so excited.
Well, before we get into what's happening with Cashew Research today, I wanted to go back to the origin story. How did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, I saw a real need for faster insights, essentially, especially for growing brands that don't normally have access to directly talk with their prospective customers. So we created Cashew so that you could get that expert level of insight done correctly, but with record speed. So within a day, you can get insights about your customers that you so desperately need to make better business decisions.
This is really a game changer, especially for small businesses. I think it's also fair to say right now in Canada that our small businesses are so important in terms of the growth of the economy in this country. So typically, if a business wanted to do research like this, how long did it used to take? How much did it used to cost before Cashew Research?
Yeah, so I actually started my career at Ipsos, which is a global market research organization, and most projects would take several months, honestly, to complete. So anywhere from a month to 2 months, up to 6 months. And then the budget for that type of research is tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now with Cashew, we can turn around a research study in one day with a readable sample size, several thousand people.
Well, typically, if a small company wants to do something like this, and I know you cater to businesses of all sizes, but they could go to something like an online survey, for example, and send out that survey to a small number of people. This is so much more advanced. So can you talk about how you leverage the latest technology to help automate some of the pieces of that research?
Totally. So if I were to break it down, there's really three pieces of any market research study. The first is you need some sort of platform to send the questions out so that someone can answer them online. The other is the people themselves. And then the third piece, which is most important, is the expertise. Because if you don't ask the right questions, if you don't have the right foundation for your study, it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. And the issue with all of those self-serve platforms is that they don't give you that foundation, that building block that is going to ensure that you are asking the right questions, and you're being really focused with the questions that you're asking to end up getting those answers you're looking for.
So let's say, for example, that I'm an entrepreneur and I want to start a business for women who buy suits. I'm just bringing that up out of the blue, but I feel like this is a market opportunity, and I want to kind of understand what type of suits women are buying, what type of budget they may have, between the ages of, let's say, 30 and 50, just to grab a demographic. Is that the type of thing that Cashier Research can help with?
100%. And even better, we could narrow down the lowest hanging fruit for that audience. So we could do a market segmentation that would be needs based, and it would segment your total addressable market of the age range that you talked about among business professionals who are women. And then it would actually tell you segment A, maybe it's women who value quality and style, but have, maybe a market size of 20%, is your lowest hanging fruit. And these women really are looking for brands that are innovative. They have a unique message. They understand their lifestyle, maybe as a mom. And it would tell you exactly kind of like what are the pillars to resonate with them in, and give you some content ideas for how you could actually reach them.
Well, I think this is such a phenomenal idea, but I'm not the only one because we met at the DMZ Women Innovation Summit, and you were part of a pitch competition. Now, there were many excellent pitches, but you really came out on top in terms of the support you got, especially the financial support of, I think, $190,000 from a panel of experts. So talk to me a little bit about that experience and what did that mean to your company?
I mean, it was an incredible experience. Like, just being in that room was so inspiring, and all of those companies are incredible, incredible ideas, so many gaps in the market that they're filling. So that part was just super inspirational, and just really proved the value of what we're bringing and that we shouldn't stop, because being surrounded by those other companies was just super inspiring. But in terms of what it's now given us, honestly, the exposure to so many prospective clients has been amazing. And then the actual financial support, and then the investors themselves really opens up doors to, more runway for our company, because it's always about runway when you're an early startup. And then just the connections that can be made. So all of these investors, for example, the Firehood and DMZ Ventures, they're super well connected with other companies that could use our services. And it opens so many doors versus not having that exposure or not having those connections. And I've really learned that it's all about relationships, no matter what business you're in. So having that warm introduction, somebody who, trusts you and puts you forward, just makes all the difference.
I touched on this a little bit in terms of this moment in time in Canada, insofar as so many entrepreneurs building businesses and how critically important that is. How do you see cashier research enabling that and playing a role?
I'm so excited about this question, Amber. I'm happy you're asking that because that's truly what I'm most passionate about, and that all of us at Cashier are most passionate about, and it's really supporting those growing businesses. You can make a lot of mistakes as an early business. You can make a lot of assumptions and you can waste a lot of money. But if you do research, for example, with the service we provide, it gives you so much more confidence, and it gives you that focus in order to spend those dollars a little bit wiser. For example, even this suit company that we're talking about, instead of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, you can actually hone in on a specific customer type and try to resonate with them, build an enthusiast group, and then go from there, which is, really, I think what we're all trying to do with building our businesses.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me today and breaking down what your business does. I'm super excited to see you continue to thrive in the future, and congratulations once again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
During tax time, here's one new and easy way that AI can help all of us small business owners work smarter. The Epson Rapid Receipt Scanner uses artificial intelligence to quickly convert scanned material into digital data and helps organize it. So my documents are AI ready for Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, and finance apps like QuickBooks and TurboTax. As a Canadian small business owner, this is a game changer to get business insights and an accurate picture of my company's financial health. The Rapid Receipts 100-page automatic document feeder lets me quickly scan receipts of many different sizes. With the RR600W, I can scan 2 sides in one pass as fast as 35 pages per minute, which is 10 times faster than the multifunction printer. It's the perfect time to start using AI, especially during one of the busiest times of the year. For more information, visit epson.ca.
Well, that's it for our show today. Never a dull moment in the world of tech. Thanks for all of your messages this past week. And as always, you can find us on X and Blue Sky for all the latest breaking news in the tech world and beyond.
Plus, please visit theambermacshow.com for any episodes that you've missed or for more information. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.